Hello and welcome to the Agati Video Podcast. This is a space where we host conversations with different designers, architects, and industry thought leaders to help educate you in your work. My name is Joe Agati, and I'm the COO and Director of Design here at Agati Furniture. Today, I have the opportunity to talk with Toni Gocke Wyre, Director of Interior Design and a clinical instructor at the University of Central Arkansas. Toni, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you, Joe. It's so nice to officially meet you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Yeah, no, this is great. I wanted to first start off, and usually we start off our podcast with just getting to know you a little better. I'd love to learn more about your background and how you got here today.
Well, I have a twisty and turny path, but I'll try to wrap it up in a nutshell. I first thought I was going to be an attorney and thought I was going to go to school to go to law school, and actually had the privilege of working with Bill Clinton's defense team here in Little Rock, Arkansas back in the 90s. Then long story short, I wound up moving to Atlanta and helping a friend redo her kitchen. And I really loved that as a hobby. And she said, you can go to school for this. And so I graduated from Georgia State University in 2001 and then moved back to Arkansas later that year. I've been working for over 25 years now in the architectural and interior design space. And just about 5 years ago, right at the turn of COVID, took a step back from large architectural practice to teach and have a little bit more sanity with my family. And about a year ago, I was promoted to be the director of the interior design program here at the University of Arkansas in Conway, which is just outside of Little Rock. And I've got a 12-year-old son at home that I enjoy staying active with, and now live 15 minutes rather from campus. So that makes work-life balance a little bit easier.
That's great. Well, congratulations on the promotion. I'm sorry, you said that was about a year ago, you said?
About a year ago, yes. And it's
Oh,
been
that's
a
exciting.
it's been a busy time since taking a step back from architectural and interior design practice. I was with Polk Stanley Wilcox, which is a wonderful, wonderful firm.
So prior to coming into the university world, what were the type of projects that you were working on?
Well, when you are a designer in the middle of Arkansas, we like to say we specialize in whatever walks through the door. If you need it, we can do it. And so, my sort of design nerd love of all things strange and exciting about the world of architecture and design made that a perfect fit for me. I've gotten to do some very large projects, including Arkansas Children's Hospital and Little Rock Southwest High School, Southwest Power Pool, office building, as well as, some smaller projects like retail shops, smaller classrooms, higher ed,
Okay.
smaller offices, and recently have completed in the past couple of years, did a wonderful break room renovation for Frito-Lay Corporation out in Jonesboro, and then worked with a Hoffman architectural team in Searcy, Arkansas to complete the library and now the White County Justice Center, which we're going to be talking about today.
Well, yeah, you talked about the White County Justice Project. Yeah, and I wanted to focus in on that a little bit on the podcast today. Can you give us a little background on that project?
Barry Hoffman, architect in Searcy, along with his family team, Lisa Hoffman and Clay Hoffman. They had really begun the project significantly before I became involved because of the prior work experience that I'd had with them on the Crane Memorial Library in Searcy. They asked me if I would re-engage on this project with regard to the furniture package. I have a real love for furniture. I started out at a Hayworth dealership way back in the day
Oh,
in
okay.
2002, and really developed a love of all things furniture systems
hmm
and became known as somewhat of an expert in that area here in Central Arkansas. So I've done a lot of furniture packages over the years. One point of interest is I believe I still may hold the record for the first and largest 100% Green Guard certified
Oh,
furniture
wow.
in the United States, which is Southwest Power Pool. It's a very large installation going after their lead sustainability certification back in 2012. So I'm very passionate about sustainability, wellness, but also furniture. And the Hoffmans reached out to me to ask if I could put together a package for the White County Justice Center. And of course, that absolutely led us to Agati. You have a great selection of products and offerings for courthouses. And so that made my job pretty easy on that front.
I appreciate that. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. So was this a new build or was it a renovation?
It is a new build. The city of Searcy is really growing. Searcy is about an hour outside of Little Rock, but I believe back in 2005 had a little bit of national notoriety as the Main Street town of America. We had a lot of investment dollars flow in to really refurbish Main Street, and it's been
Oh, wow.
identified as one of the nicest places to live in terms of cost of living, proximity to parks, education, all of those things. So it's a really beautiful community with a lot going on, and a lot of uh, regeneration of civic buildings and community spaces. And so the building that they're currently in is not great. It gets the job done, but it certainly you can tell that it's had a lot of organic growth over the years in terms of we need a extra space over here, so we're just going to build on and not think too much holistically about the entire project. So Barry and his team put together a beautiful new building. And then as many things happen with COVID, it got tabled for a little while, as we see how tax dollars and revenues are going to go because Americans were home and not working. And so then it had to be dusted off and brought back. And obviously, with renovations, because that often happens, people have changes. And so the scope and size of the project did change somewhat. And the Hoffmans really elevated, rose to the occasion there with the redesign. And then I came in really to take the plan beyond what were perhaps some placeholders in terms of desking and tables and things like that, uh, and really push the envelope to see what we could do, really go in and speak to each of the judges' teams
Okay.
and understand what each judge chambers needed, what each courtroom needed. Different courthouses work in different ways. Sometimes you have judges who do a little bit of everything, and so you need a courtroom that's going to be able to be flexible. Other times you have judges that really specialize. In this particular case for White County, really we had more of the situation where we've got judges who specialize. So we have a judge who really focuses on family court issues, one who may focus more on criminal
Yeah.
court issues, and another who may focus more on civil court issues. And
Yeah.
there is some crossover. It's not that those aren't totally solid boundaries, but for the most part, they are segregated and their teams do different things. And then, of course, we have a quorum court as well that handles your traffic tickets and things along those lines. And that's where all of the justices of the peace
Yeah.
come in and gather around that courtroom. So even though on the plan they have the same amount of square footage and they look very similar, they can really do a multitude of different things and have very different needs based on the types of cases they process.
Interesting. It's interesting you say that. We worked on the Multnomah County courthouse project, and I got to go out for a sample review. And I was there when they brought a judge in to kind of review the samples, and everybody was kind of leaning one way. And the judge came in and is like, "If you do that, I'm going to be arguing with every lawyer about this and that." And then they're like, "It has to be all uniform, same." And she's like, "I do family court like differently. We need to sit at the table around." And it was a very interesting perspective, getting that opinion in there. So I just want to learn a little more for you. Like, how did you go about that process of getting the judges kind of input on that?
Well, we had some extensive meetings early on. I had gone ahead and developed just like a placeholder plan where we're showing the scale and size of tables just based on a generic layout. I find that it's generally better to go in and speak with a client with something on the page rather than a blank page. We take for granted that we know how to read plans and understand those. Uh, my eldest daughter has perfect pitch and sings beautifully, and she just cannot understand. It's so innate to her. She cannot understand why other people cannot also do that. And so I like to say for designers and architects, our perfect pitch is reading plans and thinking about spaces visually in 3D in our brains. And we think because we can do it that everybody else can, but that's really not the case. So I'll go ahead and put my best guess forward. and give them an opportunity to react with no judgment.
Mhm.
I always tell them, you're not going to hurt my feelings unless you're trying really, really hard.
Yeah.
I expect to have pushback on this. And so we just go in and start having conversations. I'll ask them questions about what kind of work do you do? How do you like to work? Are you left-handed? Are you right-handed? Where do you want your court reporter to sit? What kind of witnesses do you have come in? These are really important conversations because I learned so much. For example, one of the judges was telling us that the way that the jury room opens up a little bit behind one of the witness stands in this particular judge's courtroom. And because the door opened into that witness box, if, say, they were going to have a kid come in and testify, and that kid had a service animal to help them with anxiety under the witness stand, they wouldn't want the jury to see that because it could prejudice the jury against that witness. And so little things like that, okay, we need to reverse the door swing so that when the jury comes in, the first thing that they're seeing is not the under counter of that witness stand. We're going to also create a little extra barrier and depth there so that if we have a dog underneath the counter. So that was something new that I really learned in this process. And that's not something that every courtroom needed, just this one particular courtroom. But it's really drilling down with the client and understanding that details, even at that level, can change how you approach a design and really make that work for that particular courtroom purpose.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you kind of always hear like justice has to be kind of blind or, uniform. And, obviously I feel like a lot of times we're exposed to that through like traumas and TV shows, but you forget about like the people in the background that like really like they take that very, very seriously. That was the argument that the last judge at Multnomah was like, if you have a lifting table, I get you're trying to be accommodating to people with different mobilities, but then I'm going to be mediating fights with like a lawyer's like, well, their table's higher, so they could be perceived differently than the jury and this and that. I'm like,
Yes.
stuff I would have never considered in a million years. I'm like, but after she said, I'm like, oh, I guess that makes a lot of sense now. So
It's very interesting. Sometimes you have to dust off your old textbooks and get into design theory about, there's a lot about hierarchy in relationships and design. Even just thinking about um, if you're going into somebody's office for a performance review, sitting across the table can be a very hierarchical exchange. And so if you're a CEO of a company and you don't want to have that I'm the boss and you're the employee feeling, just scooting around to the same side of the table and being side to side, shoulder to shoulder, rather than across from each other, sends a different psychological message just in that posture change. And so I think that's where designers really bring a lot of value to spaces like these, and that we are able to make them flexible, understanding that sometimes you may want a hierarchical exchange. For example, we emphasize that with the judge because he's up on a dais at a heightened level. And so that's reinforcing this hierarchy. But then there are other times we always seat opposing counsel side by side so that they're on an equal footing. And I can certainly see where, as much as we love sit stand tables and height adjustability, that would maybe work against some of the perception um, assumptions in a courtroom.
so before we were kind of started recording here, we were getting a little background on you, and you were talking about experience not only in the court spaces but at other civic centers. Usually like I like to ask people about trends and like what trends are you seeing courtroom wise or in civic spaces in general?
One of my personal philosophies about design is that I feel like, especially for public buildings, designers really have the opportunity to translate a space as though we're a mirror that reflects the value that people see in their community back to them. And so we really see that I see that a lot in education spaces. So kids are particularly astute. If the school down the street is a much nicer building than what they have, then they have the perception that their community cares more about the kids in the nicer building than the community cares about them. So does that make sense? And so as a designer, when you come in, especially on a civic project, but I would say really on any project, especially where there are stakeholders involved, we have to be aware of the cost of things, particularly where
Hmm.
tax dollars are being spent.
Yeah.
And you always want to strike the right balance, whether it's $1 million or $100 million or whatever the
Hmm.
project amount is. You want the community to feel like they got good value, that you didn't overspend. You never want the comment like, "Oh, they thought they were building the Taj Mahal." I mean, the poor Taj Mahal, it's been the line for years, but, you don't want people to come in and think that you thought that their money wasn't precious and you just thought you could spend it on whatever, but then you also don't want them to come in and say, "They had $10,000,000 and this is all I got." And so they don't understand things like HVAC and mechanical systems and all those things. So across the board, whether it's a hospital, a school, a civic building, there's always this outside stakeholder that you may
Mm,
not even get to talk to, but
mhm,
it's the public, and they're going to come into your
mhm,
space and judge. And so that then puts us in a category of I can't just treat this like my house or my client's house. I really have to treat this as the public building that it is. I have to reflect back the value that the community sees in this space. I have to create a space, particularly for a courthouse, that's reverent and sets a certain tone when you come in. It has to both be authoritative for those who might be there for reasons, being there to be receiving justice, but it also has to be gentle and thoughtful, and respectful for those who were there as witnesses or victims of crime or wrongdoing. And so it's really interesting to strike the right note there. In addition, we have to build for longevity. And even looking back to COVID and what COVID did to the general public's awareness about cleanliness and durability and all the things, I find really a big trend is pulling a thread from healthcare through every other type of design. We are seeing a big push toward cleanable surfaces or non-porous surfaces. Um, Really having to introduce some healthcare grade finishes and durability into these public spaces where that may not have been as much of a concern previously. And because those things are naturally more expensive, then it
yeah.
tends to drive project cost. And so designers really need to understand the return on investment, the evidence-based design. Like we have to come to the table with more knowledge about why this product is an appropriate response to what the client is requesting and why it costs more and why the quality is important. But yes, trend-wise, I see a lot of overlapping of commercial types. I see a lot of healthcare finishes coming into education and public buildings in general, and I think that's here to stay.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I haven't heard anybody kind of talk about it from like that kind of perspective, especially in a post-pandemic world, um, with those kind of like trends overlapping with each other. And I'm sure that's got to be hard for you guys too. It's, obviously Agati is we're unfortunately we're kind of at the top tier of expensive. Um, but usually it's kind of trying to balance out the total cost of ownership. Right. And that sometimes is hard for people to on this furniture side too. I see people really wrestling with that. Like, hey, I know I should probably spend this, but I only have so much money. Right. And like that's I think the real tough choices that people go through on like where do I put those dollars that are gonna last? Because to your point, they're public dollars, right? Where they're gonna last and kind of make their impact in there. When were you talking about you were talking about kind of getting spaces to reflect the public in your process. Are you engaging with like besides stakeholders but like people in the community on some of these if they're school or other kind of like civic or municipality projects?
On the White County Courthouse, I came in a little late, so I was not a part of that particular process, but on, many other projects, I have had the opportunity to speak with, stakeholders, and one really great example of that is, a school that really finished right at the beginning of the pandemic. So in the spring of 2020, going into the fall of 2020, the Little Rock Southwest High School was the first high school campus built by Little Rock since Little Rock Central, which is a famous for the segregation case. So it was a really big deal to build a campus from the ground up, and it was going to house 100 to 3,000 students, somewhere around there, from Southwest Little Rock, from two high schools that were known to be strong opponents of each
Okay.
other. And so, and then also a 98% minority community. And so, when you have that kind of building going into a community, your stakeholder list is really large because it's not about just the students and the educators and the faculty and the staff and administrators and the school board. It's also the taxpayers, but it's the parents, it's the folks that are going to be visiting on game day. um, and so I'm really proud of the job that we did in engaging with stakeholders. We had student teams looking at how old are the students now who are going to be the first class to graduate at this school and the first class to attend. And we spoke with all of those students and involved them as a design committee, and really were able to engage with them throughout a 4-year process to build this school up from the ground. It was about a 400 plus thousand square foot school with all new athletic fields and facilities. And so, yes, it is very important. And I'm sure this is not a phrase that I made up, but one that I use a lot, that we design with our stakeholders, not for them. It's very important that clients feel that they are, again, side to side, um, in the strategy alongside you, rather than always being dictated to or for. So that's very important. I think that's a really successful project and one that has been used extensively by the community. And I still hear praise and wonderful things about how much pride the students feel in that school. And again, I think for students who had come from particularly one of the buildings that those students had been in prior to this campus, had a flooding issue or some
Oh,
moisture
okay.
mitigation issue where they had to cut the wall about 3 to 4 inches above the floor, and so in
Mm,
some places, their walls didn't even touch the floor, and you could hear the next class instruction going on. I don't even know really how you concentrate
yeah.
in a space that way. And I know that the
Yeah.
school, that wasn't their ideal either. So no disparagement toward them. They were doing the best that they could. But again, those things that students experience begin to send not so subtle messages back to them, like, why do I have to be the one to attend a school where the walls don't touch the floor? And the students would say things to us like, when we would ask them for their ideal school, it would be the school in the next town, 15 minutes away, or the school an hour away. And it was a little heartbreaking for the design team because, of course, we have access to case studies of the best schools in the United States. And we sort of went back as a team and pledged, we're not going to give these kids just a school that's as nice as the one 10 minutes down the road. We're going to give them a world class, best in the United States school. And I'm really proud of the work that we did. That was through Polk Stanley Wilcox team. They're a great firm. So yeah, when you're designing for public spaces, work with, not for, talk to everybody, even people that you think may not have an opinion. Everybody does. It doesn't mean you have to always incorporate everyone's opinions, right? But yeah, I especially love if I'm on a walkthrough with a client, I might hang back if I see a custodian, and just ask them, "Hey, what cleaning protocols do you use here? What kind of are you using cabbie wipes to clean things? Are you using Clorox wipes?" Those are important things for us to know because materials behave differently with different cleaning protocols. And
Absolutely.
a lot of the most beautiful details on a project can fall down because of the way that they're being cleaned or maintained. So I never discount anyone. I think everybody is important, and I think most designers feel that way too. We love people, and we like to know more as much as we can about projects.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. There's two things I want to follow up with you on that. One, I'm going to come back to the cleaning because that's always a real challenge. But on the project specifically, so you said you engaged with students. What were some of the ideas they came back with for the project?
Yeah, well, of course, you have the students who want the swimming pool and the soccer field and all of the things, but even just things as simple as larger desk spaces, more comfortable seating, more flexible seating, more spaces to do more interesting things. And we were we were right at maker spaces had already been out and around in 2000 for quite some time, but some things, really exciting things were starting to happen around maker spaces and robotics labs and things
Oh,
like
wow.
that. And
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
we were able to develop some really engaging spaces for this campus where they could have their own robotics tournament ring
Mhm.
and
Okay.
host other schools
Oh,
here,
wow,
which
yeah.
was something that this particular school district had not been able to capitalize on hosting tournaments of any kind in their previous facility. So those are things that begin to be game changers for a school and students take a lot of pride in. But the makerspace, the career development spaces, um, even though in education, particularly, we've seen a loss in vocational study and the shop classes have sort of
Yep,
gone away, if you will.
yep.
Personally, I hope that they come back. I think they're a
Yeah.
really important part of education. And on the design side, I can see where we're going to be hurting in our industry for those craftsmen who would have taken shop. We're going to have a deficit in that. Um, but it was very interesting to hear the students talk about this because while they're very career focused and very college minded, they also want to learn how to do things, real practical things. They want to learn how to balance a checkbook and they want to understand what compounded interest is. But at the same time, they want to be able to make something with their hands and bring it home and see what they've done all day. And so, finding this balance between the academic spaces, the athletic spaces, the performing arts spaces as well as the maker spaces is really important. And so really it was gratifying to hear the students validate that what we were seeing in the marketplace was what they wanted and where they wanted to go.
Oh, wow, that's great. Yeah, and so when did the school get completed then?
So it opened, their first class attended in August of 2020. And of course, that was when we were on lockdown, so we couldn't our grand opening, we had the circles 6 feet apart and only so many people could attend, and, but it was an incredible day. I remember a young man who had been on the design committee for with us the entire 4 years, since 2016, was one of the invited guests to come and speak, and um, I was sort of tucked behind a column on my 6-foot circle, and he came in and it's one of the greatest privileges of my life, I think, as a designer to get to witness his reaction when he came in. And it wasn't something that I really was prepared for. But at first I thought he was upset because he was looking around and he kept saying, no, no, no. And I thought, oh no, what's wrong? And as I witnessed his progression of just taking it in and acceptance, he was saying, "This is for me. This is
Mm.
my school.
Mhm.
This is my school," and questioning, and then by the time he got to the end of just looking around, it went from a question of, "This is my school," to, "This is my school." You could
Yeah.
just feel the pride, um,
Mhm.
in that 30-second trajectory, and it brought me to tears, and it still makes me a little misty-eyed to think about that moment today because we often, disregard the impact of design. We talk about it all the time, and we know that it's there, but unless you're watching the big reveal on HGTV, those of us who do commercial design don't often get to be there for that
Yeah,
moment
right.
when your client walks in and sees something for the first time. And so that was incredibly gratifying. And certainly there are things that we could have done better. There always are. There are things that I'm sure that they've had to evolve over the years. But just that one young man's response, I will carry with me forever as one of the best moments of my career.
Well, that's great. Like I said, I wanted to follow up on one other thing you mentioned earlier. It was about cleaning and maintenance, and I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of people don't consider that. And if I remember hearing you say, you can remind me if this is correct, that like that can do. You find that that does a lot of damage. I mean, we find that, and I usually try to convey that to people that like it's like the some of the greatest damage that's done is through the cleaning process. How do you how do you work with people? How do you work with clients on that, educating them? Do you try to come up with processes for them? Like what do you do to try to mitigate that as much as possible?
We do a couple of things. So, one, and this usually stems from a bad experience that you've had, right? I mean, we usually don't start out in this realm, but of course, me being in healthcare as well as other sectors of design, we've had a bad experience, especially in the early days when we were pivoting away from vinyl to polyurethane. And I'm all for, being sustainable. It's very challenging in the healthcare space because nothing really performs like vinyl, and yet we're trying to promote the polyurethanes. And so I know the polyurethanes have really improved a lot. So please don't think I'm speaking ill of them. But at this time, when they were first introduced, I didn't realize that one of my clients was using a product called Cavi Wipes, which has a pretty significant alcohol
Yeah.
content in it. And even though, like, the manufacturer may say, hey, you can use an antibacterial product on this, or you can use something that's alcohol based, they will also have follow up language that says something along the lines of, please be sure that you rinse the product completely off within 60 seconds of application, or something like that. Well, I can tell you that custodial staff, they never do that. And in fact, the hospitals usually feel exactly the opposite. They're like, no, we want you to leave it on there so that it dries with the product because that increases the antimicrobial properties of it. And so here we have two standards that are really fighting against each other. And so, of course, we had a product failure with one of these upholsteries where it just looked like the Saharan desert on the face of this product, right? It
Yes.
had cracked, it had was the finish was starting to flake off, and we all had to figure out how to replace, cushions and all these things. So that's a situation no one wants. And of course, when that happened, and that was about a decade or so ago at least, when that happened, we thought, well, we really have to jump in and do what we can to mitigate this because we don't want to be in this situation again. And so our strategy then became a necessary part of programming, just like we would tell a client who wanted anything, whether it was an office or restaurant, great, I need to speak to key staff. And key staff include these people.
Yeah.
And if the custodial staff isn't on your current list of key staff, add them
Yeah.
because they really can make or break. And so just getting in there and understanding, what products are you using? What's your daily protocol? Are you vacuuming every day? Are you only vacuuming every week? How often do you do heat extraction? Do you ever do heat extraction? Like, is that like, perhaps we should inquire about budgeting for some of these quarterly or annual maintenance things that may have been neglected previously. So, having those early conversations is very important. And then from that, we began to develop a list of products and materials that we feel will work well and perform under those conditions. And we have someone on our design team, or multiple people on our design team, will begin to assemble the material data sheets and the maintenance instructions for those products. And so we give a binder. Used to be a physical binder, now it's a digital binder, but we will make sure that facilities has that so that they understand certain cleaning protocols. And that's a challenge because custodial staff has a high turnover rate. And sometimes that'll be contracted out for different companies. They may bid and win a job. And so we found that it's very helpful, though, to the facility manager or whoever's in charge of that on the client side, that they always have either a physical representation or a digital, or sometimes both,
Hmm.
where they can give that to their contract person and make
Yeah.
sure that they're agreeing to those terms. So that feels like it's getting in the weeds, but it really is adding an extra level of protection.
Yes.
Like you said, we're always balancing some of the more expensive materials and products against some of the more budget friendly. And I always play that high low game. I want to get Agati in on a project, and I know that one of the reasons why the cost may be a little bit more for Agati is because I'm getting solid wood, I'm getting authentic products, I'm getting FSC certified product, I'm getting things that are made to last. So the last thing I want to have happen is for any damage to occur through a lacking cleaning protocol. So that just sets all of us up for success. And I think the client, it also, designers should realize it sets you apart as a designer and makes you someone that your client is more likely to recommend because you've gone that extra step to provide them with information and set them up for success in maintaining. Nobody wants to ruin anything because you use the wrong product on it. So it's just a win win all the way around. It does take a little bit of extra time to do that. So you have to budget for that when you're thinking about the hours you're going to spend, but it's well worth it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's hard because it's not the sexiest conversation to have, right?
Not the funnest conversation.
But it is like wholeheartedly necessary. And I think what was interesting, you hit on, and I usually tell people this a lot. It's like, you don't, and nobody's trying to throw the custodial staff under the bus, but there are real challenges. They're contracted out. There could be turnover. There could be a language barrier. Like if we're just speaking open and honest, right? Those are the realities that you're challenged with. So to your point, I think you're very smart to like, they should be part of your key stakeholder discussion and just be honest about these. How you're gonna, manage all of this. Cause it'll 100% make or break the product lots of times, in there.
Absolutely. And they are so thrilled to be included. I have never had a situation where part of the custodial team has ever been upset about being asked their opinion or how they do things. They're always very happy to show you and share their opinions. And it has really saved us, particularly in our conversations with Arkansas Children's. We had a wonderful collaboration with them and even worked with several product manufacturers from, like we would, if we were working with you, we would ask you to send us an arm with your typical
Mhm.
stain, like a
Yep.
wood stain, or textile, send us a yard of your fabric, and we would send that to the custodial staff and allow them to do your worst. Do, you know, do this, clean this how you normally clean it, subject it to your normal protocols, and let's see what performs. And they love that. They love being a part of that. You don't always have the time, that does take a little bit of extra time. But when you can do that, it's very meaningful. And it also builds trust with you and your client and builds trust and allows them to build confidence in the products that you are recommending because everybody has a little bit of sticker shock on commercial furniture. And we always want to, as designers and just humans in general, when we're talking with clients about design projects, we always want to romanticize human behavior and speak about the most lovely, wonderful parts of the facility. But the reality is, you're dealing with human psychology, territoriality, people from all different walks of life using a public facility. And there's a lot really nested in there. And even just to bring it back around to the White County Courthouse or the Justice Center, um, you are dealing with people from all different backgrounds, and you have some people who are coming in there to be sentenced
Yeah.
for a crime. You have other people who are coming in to testify.
Mhm.
Sometimes tempers flare. You may have opposing counsel in a divorce party negotiating over, custody and things that really tug at your heartstrings. And even, we are just in the process of having some benches bolted down. Um, so we tend to want to romanticize human behavior, but as designers, we really also have to understand that humans don't act like angels in every situation.
Mhm.
Sometimes you need finishes that are incredibly durable,
Mhm.
cleanable.
Yep.
Sometimes you need finishes that can be bolted down to the concrete subfloor so they can't
Yeah.
be tumped over or thrown at someone. And
Mhm.
those are those are things that we don't like to talk about in polite conversations, but designers and architects really need to understand that aspect of any public space and mitigate for that as much as we can without it being obvious, right? We don't want it, you don't have to create a stainless steel interior, but you can create interiors with solid pieces of furniture. Like the wood is a beautiful finish that's durable and cleanable and works well with all sorts of folks coming in and using it. So um, we always have to keep that in the backs of our minds.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard, a designer we work with, she was describes as, I think how does she say it? Boutique aesthetics with prison yard durability is the balance you're trying to hit.
Yes, we can be friends, and I totally understand that aesthetic. In the South, we sometimes refer to those as hose down interiors as well.
Yeah. There you go. Well, again, I really appreciate the time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and we can't wait to see. We're in the middle of the final installation at the White County Justice Center, and I can't wait to see how it's all coming together. So we're excited to partner with you on that.